Hi everyone and welcome to the Positive Vet Nurse channel, and I hope that everyone is doing really well today. So before I get started, you're probably wondering, where the hell have I been? Though I'll make it very brief because this episode is going to be a juicy one. So I started a permanent role in practice back in April. I just couldn't continue doing locum work anymore with how scarce it was actually becoming to actually find work. And then I started the Positive Vet Nurse Club back in March, which is a new community membership that I have created for veterinary nurses to build confidence while supporting their mental well-being. And then I've had lots of one-to-one clients, and I also started YouTube as well. So as you can probably imagine, I have been rather busy. Anyway, enough of me now. Let's get into this episode. So why do we doubt ourselves so bloody much? So, you can have years of experience, you can have qualifications coming out your ear holes, hundreds of patients that you've had the pleasure to nurse, colleagues telling you that you're doing an amazing job, and then one slightly shit thing happens and suddenly you'll question whether you should have even been able to qualify in the first place. And you'll say things like, did I mess up? Should I have noticed that sooner? Everyone else seems to know more than me. Who am I to speak up about this? And I want to apply for that job, but I know that I am just not good enough. So self-doubt is something that I have experienced myself on multiple occasions throughout my career. And I still have moments of doubt, and that is normal. Like, you can never get rid of self-doubt completely. And I've also coached lots of vet nurses as well through their self-doubt. And despite them being incredibly capable and fantastic nurses, their internal dialogue tells them that they aren't. And it is more common than people actually realise. So today I want to talk to you about where self-doubt actually comes from, why we see it in veterinary and why it's such a breeding ground for self-doubt, what it looks like in practice, and most importantly, what the bloody hell do we do about it? So, in a nutshell, self-doubt is basically uncertainty about your own abilities, decisions, judgment, or your worth. And there's a really useful veterinary study online by Kogan and his friends that surveyed 941 practicing veterinarians internationally. And they found that 68% met or exceeded the cutoff for the impostor phenomenon using something called a Clance impostor phenomenon scale. So UK residents, women and people early in their careers had higher odds of scoring highly. Now, I don't want us to slap the label of imposter syndrome on every moment of uncertainty, right? Sometimes you're just new at something. Sometimes you're just genuinely needing more training. And sometimes you've just had a shit day. Because confidence isn't knowing everything, but confidence is being able to say, I don't know this yet, but I trust myself to figure it out, ask for help, and learn along the way. So, where does self-doubt even come from in the first place? So, self-doubt can come from our past experiences and the culture we are surrounded by. So, let me explain this a little bit. So in our past experience, we may have been criticised, felt embarrassed by something, we've made a mistake, been shouted at, compared ourselves to others, had someone question our competence, or been thrown into something before we're even ready. And those are all valid reasons of self-doubt that the brain has then decided to store away in its little compartment and remember in its own database. So that when you get put in that situation again, where these past experiences were created and made you feel uncomfortable, that's when you get these feelings and emotions coming up of, I can't do this, and of course all the self-doubt that comes with that. And your brain, or as I like to say, your inner critic, likes to remind you that you aren't safe, even though you are, but it wants to remind you that something's not okay about this situation. And so it will make predictions that this might happen again. So for example, you might do an anaesthetic. Now you've done anaesthetics 500 or more times, but for some reason your brain suddenly goes, oh fuck, what if something goes wrong, or what if that, what if this? And now you're scanning, you're checking, and you're second guessing everything, replaying all the moments, all the things that have happened in the past, and you're looking for the evidence now to see where you have fucked up. Anxiety and self-doubt can make you search for threat-confirming evidence. So you remember the catheter that you couldn't get in, yet you don't remember the 400 that went in absolutely fine. You remember the one person who criticised you, yet you forget the 10 people who told you that you are absolutely brilliant. Your brain isn't necessarily giving you an objective performance review, it's just trying to keep you safe. A poor work culture or negative environment you've been in can also influence self-doubt further. The RCBS My Maths Initiative survey of more than 650 student veterinary nurses, recently qualified veterinary nurses and clinical coaches found that 96% agreed or strongly agreed that bullying and incivility were a serious problem within the profession, which makes me really, really sad. Now, sometimes your self-doubt isn't something you've randomly created in your head. Sometimes you've spent years in an environment where you're being questioned, criticised, or made to feel that you're not good enough, and it's been normalised, which isn't okay. And I do believe that environment in which you work can heavily influence your confidence levels as well, because sometimes all you need is proper training, mentorship, psychological safety, constructive feedback, and someone who actually believes in you and offers you support to grow in your career. So what does self-doubt actually look like in practice then? And how does it show up? Now, I'm going to read out to you some of the common ones and see if you can resonate with any of these and notice how you feel. So self-doubt can look like constantly asking for reassurance, avoiding procedures you don't feel 100% confident with, not putting yourself forward for the opportunities, staying in your comfort zone, over-preparing, over-checking, struggling to accept compliments, assuming positive feedback is just politeness, catastrophizing mistakes, comparing yourself to colleagues, thinking everyone else is more competent, feeling like you should know more because you've been qualified X years, not applying for jobs because you don't tick every box, not speaking up in clinical discussions, procrastinating, perfectionism, working excessively hard to prove yourself, and lastly, feeling like you need another qualification before you're allowed to feel confident. And with all these in mind, often more than not, self-doubt can make someone look really confident on the outside, but internally it can make someone who has unattainably high standards and someone who is an overachiever, thinking if they try harder, they'll then be able to prove themselves that they are enough. I find though that people that are genuinely harder than themselves and have these unattainably high standards are the same people who are constantly moving the goalposts further. So they'll say things like, when I'm qualified, I'll finally feel good enough about myself. When I've done multiple certificates, then I'll be good enough. Or when I get that promotion, I'll know that I've made it. But then these things come, and then the goalpost moves yet again to the next thing, and then you're still left feeling miserable again. And that was me for such a really long time. I wasn't able to acknowledge how far that I'd actually come, and that all my small wins and achievements have got me to where I am now, And that's because I was so focused on, okay then, what's next? And these unattainable high standards are often driven by expectations and societal conforming. So somewhere along the way, you decided to create a timeline for yourself based off somebody else's or what you think you should be doing and not what you want to be doing. Therefore, it can make self-doubt creep in big time. And here's a little story for you. So when I started the Positive Vet Nurse, I thought, is anyone actually going to give a shit about this? And I was worried that people would judge me, that people would mock me and laugh at me. I thought I'd get some abuse sent towards me or people saying that I was being attention seeking. I thought that my content would never be good enough. Or I thought, maybe people are going to think this is really ridiculous and stupid. And yet, I did it anyway, despite all of those fears and limiting beliefs that I would put against myself. And now I've built a really large audience. I've got people that are actively engaged in what I do, people that are subscribed to my channels, that come to me for coaching, people that actually message me and tell me that the work that I'm doing, the content that I've made, has really helped them. And I get to have these conversations with people all over the world, and I absolutely love and adore it. And I started while I was still doubtful, because confidence doesn't come first, but the action of doing these things helped me to give my brain evidence that I can do it, I am capable. So now I'm going to give you a few different tools and exercises to try and hopefully help you with your self-doubt. So the first one is an exercise I like to call the self-doubt detector. So this is where we're going to investigate where this belief came from rather than just accepting it as a fact. So you'll need a pen and paper. So if you're driving whilst you're listening to this, you can either have a little listen, or when you get home and you are safe, you can then give it a go. So I need you to draw for me 6 columns going straight down. And at the top of each one, I want you to write the following in this order: the doubt, the origin, the meaning, the evidence, the challenge, and the reframe. And starting with the doubt section, I want you to ask yourself, what do you actually doubt about yourself? And these are usually I statements. A good example of this here might be something like, I'm not good enough. Then next we will look into the origin. So in that column, write about when you first learned about this, who might have said it to you, and what happened. This is an example of what it could sound like. I remember being a student and struggling with anaesthesia. A more experienced nurse criticised me in front of other people. I felt embarrassed and stupid. It's also essential here to dive a little bit deeper and ask yourself, what actually happened? What did they say? What were you feeling in your body? And what did you think about yourself after the event? Then in the next column, the meaning column, I want you to write down how that experience has shaped the way that you see yourself. For example, from being made to feel embarrassed or stupid from your struggle during the anaesthetic, you decided that struggling meant that you aren't a good enough veterinary nurse. And then in the 4th column, I want you to ask yourself, what evidence supports this belief and what evidence challenges it? So an example for this same one is the for belief might look something like, I've struggled with procedures, and then the against might look like, I've been qualified for X amount of years, I've successfully managed hundreds of patients, I've been trusted with difficult cases before, my colleagues ask me for advice, I've completed additional training and do regular CBD. I've improved massively since that experience. And the thing is here, we're not trying to gaslight ourselves into believing that we're perfect, because no one is. But we're looking at the whole picture from a bird's eye view. So then from that, we're going to do the fun part now. So in column 5, I want you to challenge the belief. So ask these questions. Is this belief 100% true? Is it true that you're not good enough? And then what evidence am I ignoring? And then ask yourself, am I confusing one negative experience with my entire ability? Then ask, would I judge another nurse this harshly for the same thing? And then what would someone who believed in me say about this? And then ask, is this my belief, or is this something somebody else taught me? Then lastly, my favourite is, what else could this experience mean? Because maybe struggling with that anaesthetic didn't mean that you're not good enough. Maybe it just meant that you just needed a bit of extra support, or maybe it was something that you've never dealt with before. And that's a completely different story in itself. And then lastly, in column 6, which is all about reframing, my favourite part, this is all about what you are going to do to choose a different belief instead. So this could be something like, I don't need to know everything to be a good nurse. Or you might say something like, one difficult experience doesn't define my clinical ability. Or I am allowed to still be learning. I can be competent and still sometimes feel uncertain. Or I trust myself to ask for help when I need it. And you see, that's much more powerful, because you're not trying to convince yourself of something ridiculous. You're actually creating a more accurate belief. So with that all being in mind, it would be a shame to leave it all at that, wouldn't it? So here's a big question for you. What are you going to do differently because of this new belief? So for example, you might say, I'm going to start putting myself forward for that theatre opportunity again. I'm going to go delve into some more anaesthetics. Or I'm going to perform the procedure that I've been avoiding with appropriate support. Or I'm going to stop asking 3 people for reassurance before trusting my own clinical judgment. Or you might say to yourself, I'm going to apply for that job even if I don't tick every single box correctly. Because this is where the real change happens. You can challenge a belief all day long, but your brain also needs new experiences to prove that the new belief is safe and that it is possible. Now, the next piece of advice I want to give you is to stop waiting until you feel confident to do something. The confidence loop goes something like this. So you do something, you survive it, you gather that evidence to your brain, your confidence increases with competency, you're willing to do more, and then your confidence increases again and again and again. And it's not that you feel confident and then you do the thing. It never really works like that, because if you wait until you feel confident, gosh, you'll probably be waiting forever. I didn't wake up one morning and think, you know what? I am absolutely certain that everybody will love this. Everyone will love the Positive Vet Nurse and everything that I've got to offer. I just decided it was going to be worth doing, even though I was really scared to do it. Now, earlier, we spoke about how comparison can be a massive influence when it comes to self-doubt. Now, one of the best quotes that I've ever heard was, stop comparing your chapter 3 with someone else's chapter 30. Or it went something like that. I don't actually remember who said it, but it basically implies that sometimes we are viewing someone else's timeline as our own failure. Meaning, that we just aren't good enough then, if we aren't on their timeline. Meanwhile, you don't know what this person's circumstances was. You don't know what their opportunities were. You don't know what support they had, or their finances, or what their goals were. And, you aren't wearing that person's shoes. You have your own to walk in. And you create your own timeline through your own experiences and through your own goals. So ask yourself, do I actually want what they have? Or do I just want the feeling I think having it would give me? So the last tool that I'll mention is creating a positivity proof bank. And this is your proof that you are good enough, because it shows all these lovely things like feedback, compliments, cases you're really proud of, difficult situations that you've handled, things you've learnt, procedures you've improved at, times you've advocated for your patients, moments you've helped a colleague, qualifications that you've studied hard to get, achievements, and the tiny wins. And you can keep this list in your phone and add to it regularly. And it's something you can visit whenever you're having moments of self-doubt, because our emotions sometimes get the best of us, whereas this is clear-cut evidence. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and more importantly, I hope it's given you something to think about. And if you've recognised yourself in any of what I've spoken about today, I really want you to remember that self-doubt doesn't mean that you're not capable. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough, and it certainly doesn't mean that you're the only one feeling this way. It just means that you are human. And sometimes that little voice of doubt is just an old story that you've been carrying for such a long time, and it's been normal to carry it. So maybe this week, rather than trying to get rid of your self-doubt completely, get curious about it, do the self-detective exercise, and create your own positivity proof bank. Now remember, you don't need to be 100% before you take the next step. Sometimes confidence comes from taking the step, doing the thing, and giving yourself the opportunity to prove yourself that you can. And if you take one thing away from this episode, let it be that self-doubt is a feeling. It isn't a fact. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to follow along or subscribe to the podcast. And if you know another veterinary nurse who constantly doubts themselves, send this podcast their way. As always, if you're looking for more ongoing support, check out my one-to-one coaching or join the Positive Vet Nurse community. I'll see you on the next one.